The fluorescent lights in exam room 3 flickered, casting long, jaundiced shadows across the sterile white walls. My patient, Mr. Henderson, a man I'd seen a dozen times for everything from ingrown toenails to suspected angina, lay strapped to the gurney, a sheet pulled up to his chest. His eyes, usually a watery blue, were now a milky white, unfocused and wide. His jaw hung slack, a thin string of drool glistening on his chin. Dr. Chen, a senior resident, adjusted the pulse oximeter on Henderson's finger. Still nothing, Dr. Thorne. Pulse is flat, respirations nil. Pupils fixed and dilated. Brain death confirmed at 2017. I nodded, feeling the familiar, hollow ache of losing a patient. Henderson had come in with what looked like a severe, rapid-onset bacterial meningitis. Within hours, he'd deteriorated. His fever had spiked to 106, followed by violent seizures, then this blank, unresponsive state. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. As a doctor, I faced death countless times, but this felt different. Run one more full tox screen, I instructed, my voice flat, just in case. Anything that could cause this rapid neurological collapse, and then this. I gestured vaguely at Henderson's still, almost unnatural posture. He looked less like a patient, more like a mannequin. Chen nodded, already drawing a fresh blood sample. The low hum of the hospital was usually a comforting constant. The distant wail of a siren, the gentle beep of machines, the murmur of voices. Tonight, it felt eerily subdued, punctuated by an odd, sporadic coughing from down the hall. A deep, wet, almost guttural cough. Suddenly, Henderson's body spasmed. It wasn't a seizure, it was a violent, jerking twitch. The gurney rattled against the linoleum. Chen dropped the syringe, the needle clattering against the floor. "Dr. Thorne," her voice was a high-pitched question. My medical instincts screamed post-mortem muscle spasm, a rare but known phenomenon. But the sheer force of it! Henderson's chest heaved. A wet, tearing sound came from deep within his throat, like crumbling paper. His milky eyes snapped wide open, pupils still dilated, but now they fixed on Chen with an unnerving intensity, an animalistic glint. "Mr. Henderson?" I stepped forward, reaching for his wrist. "Can you hear me?" He didn't answer. Instead, his head snapped violently towards Chen, and his jaw unhinged, opening to an impossible width. A black, viscous fluid dripped from his teeth. The sound he made wasn't human. It was a strangled, guttural shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated hunger. Chen didn't have time to react. Henderson lunged forward, the gurney strap snapping with a sickening rip. His teeth sank into Chen's neck, just below her jawline. The resident screamed, a choked, terrified sound, her hands flying up to push him away. But Henderson's grip was absolute, his body now possessing an unnatural strength. I saw the flash of white bone, the dark gush of arterial blood. Chen's scream ended in a wet gurgle as her eyes rolled back. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. What the hell was happening? Adrenaline surged, bypassing fear, jumping straight to action. I grabbed the IV pole, a heavy chrome stand, and swung it with all my might. The pole connected with Henderson's head, a sickening thunk that vibrated up my arm. He didn't release Chen. He just grunted, a low animal growl, and his head snapped back, his jaw still clamped around her throat. He shook her like a rabid dog, tearing at the flesh. "Get off her!" I roared, swinging the pole again and again. Each impact sent a shockwave through my hands, but he wouldn't let go. Blood sprayed, painting the sterile room a visceral crimson. Chen's body went limp, a lifeless rag doll. Henderson finally pulled away, a chunk of her neck still in his mouth. He chewed, slowly, deliberately, his milky eyes now fixed on me. Black fluid streaked his chin, mixed with her blood. His pupils, once dilated, now had a faint reddish glow, like dying embers. He lunged. I barely had time to react, stepping back, swinging the IV pole in a wide arc. It hit him in the chest, pushing him back, but he didn't fall. He just snarled, a low, guttural sound that rattled in my chest. This isn't a patient. This isn't even human. This was a monster. A zombie. The word, absurd in the fluorescent light of the ER, crystallized in my mind with terrifying clarity. I backed away, towards the door, Henderson shambling after me, a relentless predator. His movements were jerky, unnatural, but fast, too fast. I pulled the heavy crash cart into his path, sending a cascade of surgical tools clattering to the floor. The distraction bought me a precious second. I burst out of exam room 3, slamming the door shut behind me, the sound echoing through the strangely quiet ER. Code black in exam room 3, I screamed, my voice raw, already hoarse. Stat, armed security, call a full lockdown. The words felt hollow even as I uttered them. The ER was a ghost town. The usual organized chaos of a Friday night was gone. A flickering monitor showed a flat line from a bay. Another alarm chirped endlessly, unheeded. The guttural coughing I'd heard earlier was now closer, louder, originating from behind the triage desk. A nurse, Maria, rounded the corner, her uniform stained. Her eyes were wide with terror, not recognition. "Dr. Thorne, oh God, Dr. Thorne, stay back!" But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, at something coming up behind her. A figure in scrubs, hunched over, shambling forward. It was Dr. Miller, his face pale, one eye milky and blown, the other fixed with the same predatory gleam I'd seen in Henderson. Blood matted his hair, and his scrubs were torn, revealing a gaping crimson wound on his arm. He didn't walk, he lurched, a sickening, broken gait, his mouth agape. "Maria, run!" I yelled, but it was too late. Miller, my colleague, a man I'd shared coffee with just hours ago, lunged at Maria, his hands tearing at her. She screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure agony. I watched, frozen in horror, as Miller ripped at her arm, then her neck. The world was ending, not with a bang, but with a chew. My mind raced, struggling to process. Henderson, Miller, the rapid onset, the violence, the hunger. This wasn't a disease I could treat. This was something else, something out of a nightmare. The hospital, my sanctuary, my place of healing, had become a charnel house. A new sound joined the cacophony of Maria's dying screams and Miller's guttural growls, the distant, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the ER entrance doors being slammed against their frames. Shouts, then more screams, panic. I couldn't help Maria. She was already gone. I knew it in the sickening way her struggles ceased. I couldn't help Chen. I had to survive. I'm a doctor, not a soldier, but survival instinct overrides the Hippocratic oath when the dead walk. I turned, my eyes scanning the chaotic ER. My gaze landed on the emergency fire axe mounted on the wall near the stairwell. It was behind the triage desk, dangerously close to Miller, who was now feasting on Maria. What would I do? What would any sane person do? I clenched my fists. I had to get to that axe. It was my only chance. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the smell of blood and sterile cleaner mixing in my nostrils, a potent cocktail of life and death. The ER entrance doors were still being battered. More screams, closer now. The virus, the zombies, whatever they were spreading. I moved, not running, but a fast, low crouch, using the abandoned gurneys and crash carts as cover. Miller was still focused on Maria, tearing at her flesh with sickening intensity. I skirted wide, heart pounding against my ribs like a drum. Each step was a gamble. Show, don't tell. My legs felt heavy, my vision tunneled. I could hear my own ragged breathing, loud in my ears. I reached the wall, my fingers brushing the cool metal of the axe handle. It was heavier than I expected, the red plastic case brittle with age. I yanked it free, the glass shattering with a loud crash that echoed through the empty ER. Miller's head snapped up. His milky eyes locked onto me, and he let out another ear-splitting shriek. He dropped Maria's body, the sound of her collapsing to the floor almost lost beneath his inhuman roar. He lunged, a terrible broken limb sprint. I raised the axe, the cold weight a strange comfort in my shaking hands. My medical training screamed at me, primum non nocere, first, do no harm. But this wasn't harm. This was self-preservation. This was war. He was on me in a second. I swung the axe, a wild, desperate arc. It connected with his shoulder, a dull thud. He staggered but didn't stop. He grabbed my arm, his fingers like iron claws tearing at my sleeve. I felt the prick of pain as his broken fingernails raked my skin. Focus, Elias, aim for the head. Every zombie movie, every nightmare, every absurd horror story I'd ever scoffed at flooded my mind. Headshots, brain damage, that's what stopped him. I pulled back, trying to twist free. His grip tightened, pulling me closer. His foul breath, a putrid mix of decay and blood, washed over my face. His jaw opened wide, black fluid dripping from his teeth, aiming for my throat. With a surge of desperate strength, I twisted, wrenching my arm free, leaving a chunk of my scrub sleeve in his grasp. I brought the axe down with all my might, aiming for his head. The blade sank into his skull with a sickening crunch, cleaving through bone. Miller spasmed, a final violent jerk, and then collapsed, hitting the linoleum with a heavy thud. His body lay still, the axe buried in his head. No more growls, no more movement. Just silence, save for the distant thudding at the ER entrance. I stood over him, axe still in hand, chest heaving, gulping air. My arm throbbed where his nails had scratched me. I looked at the dark streaks on my skin. A doctor, surviving the first night in a zombie-infested hospital. This was real, and I was alone. The distant thudding at the ER entrance intensified, accompanied by renewed screams, then what sounded like gunshots, muffled and far away. Security, they're fighting them. My gut twisted. They wouldn't last. No one would. The infection is spreading through medical facilities. I remembered the radio message from the style guide, a chilling echo from another story. This was a hospital, a hotbed. I yanked the axe free from Miller's skull, wiping the blade on his ruined scrubs, a futile gesture. My heart was still a frantic drum, but my mind was clearer now. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was Dr. Elias Thorne. I specialized in emergencies. This was the biggest emergency of my life. I needed to move. Staying in the ER was suicide. I needed to get to a higher floor, find a more secure location. The operating theaters on the 6th floor? The ICU on the 7th? They had their own dangers, but also their own resources. Medical supplies, potential weapons. My eyes swept the deserted ER. The front doors were still being assaulted. The chaos sounded like it was winning. I had to go through the back, the staff entrance. It led to a network of service corridors, supply rooms, and ultimately the main stairwells. I moved with purpose, axe held ready, my scrub shoes squeaking on the blood-slicked floor. The smell was overpowering now, coppery blood, bile, and that strange chemical decay. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant groan sent a jolt of ice down my spine. I reached the staff entrance, a heavy fire door. It had a keycard reader, but I knew the emergency override. I punched in the code, my fingers fumbling slightly, but hitting the right sequence. The lock clicked open with a loud metallic thud that seemed to echo for miles. I slipped through, slamming the door shut behind me, the heavy steel providing a temporary barrier between me and the nightmare in the ER. The service corridor was dark, lit only by emergency lights that cast a sickly green glow. The air was cold, damp, smelling of disinfectant and stale food. Where was everyone? Where were the other doctors, the nurses, the orderlies? The question hung heavy, a terrifying implication. They were either dead or worse, them. I moved cautiously, each step deliberate, my axe held high. My mind was a whirlwind of strategies. What are my assets? What are my threats? Assets, medical knowledge, an axe, my wits. Threats, an unknown number of infected, lack of supplies, the sheer scale of the building. I passed linen closets, the doors slightly ajar, revealing stacks of white sheets. Kitchens, their industrial freezers humming, promising sustenance, but also danger. I could hear noises now, from above and below, muffled moans, the distinct sound of breaking glass. I reached a junction. To my left, the main staff stairwell. To my right, a long corridor leading to the loading docks and ultimately outside. Outside was tempting, a desperate animal urge to escape the confines of this infected tomb. But what was out there? The news had been vague, terrified whispers. Military bases compromised, 70% infection rates. No, outside was likely worse. Inside, at least I knew the layout. A doctor who survived the first night in a zombie-infested hospital has to use the hospital to his advantage. The stairwell. It was narrow, concrete, a potential bottleneck. Dangerous, but it led upwards. I needed high ground, a defensible position. I started climbing, each step echoing in the silent concrete shaft. The only other sound was my own ragged breathing in the faint, unsettling thump, thump, thump of something heavy being dragged down a floor above. They're here, everywhere. The first floor, the second, the third. On the fourth floor landing, I paused, listening. The dragging sound had stopped. A low growl. It was coming from the floor above. I gripped the axe tighter, my knuckles white. My heart pounded a violent rhythm against my ribs. I had to confront them or be trapped. What kind of doctor runs from his problems? But these weren't problems. They were monsters. I crept up the final flight of stairs to the fifth floor. The door was slightly ajar. A sliver of greenish light spilled from the crack. I pushed it open, slowly, silently. The fifth floor was part of the oncology ward. It was dark, the main lights off, only the emergency strips glowing. Empty patient rooms lined the hallway, their doors ajar, revealing rumpled beds, abandoned personal effects. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of dried blood, mixed with the faint, sweet scent of antiseptic. In the middle of the hallway, a large, hulking figure in a patient gown was hunched over something on the floor. It was Staff Sergeant Reynolds, a gruff but kind veteran I'd treated for pneumonia last week. Now he was tearing at the arm of what looked like a dietary aid, her face mashed and unrecognizable. Reynolds' growls were deep, guttural, radiating menace. His spine was unnaturally bent, his head twisted at an odd angle. His back was to me. This is it. Kill or be killed. My medical training, my oath, my years of saving lives meant nothing now. All that mattered was the axe in my hand and the primal urge to survive. I moved, a silent predator, each step measured, careful. The floor was covered in debris, fallen IV stands, overturned wheelchairs, scattered papers. I stepped over them, my focus absolute. Reynolds was still tearing at his victim, oblivious. I was 3 feet away. 2, 1. I raised the axe, the familiar weight a dark extension of my will. I brought it down, aiming for the back of his head, where the spine met the skull, a precise, devastating blow. It's a mercy, Elias. It's a mercy. The axe bit deep. Reynolds spasmed, a violent arching twist, his growl turning into a choked gasp. He fell forward, hitting the ground with a wet thud, his head almost completely severed. He lay still. I stood over him, trembling, the adrenaline rush leaving me lightheaded. My hands were slick with sweat, my grip on the axe almost failing. 2 down. How many more? This isn't what they teach you in med school. I took a moment, leaning against the cold wall,
trying to control my breathing.
The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant thumping from the ER below, now fading, growing fainter. They must have breached it fully. God help them all. My eyes swept the hallway. The patient rooms were still open. I needed to find a safe room, a place to catch my breath, assess my situation, and most importantly, find a way to rearm myself beyond a single fire axe. A doctor doesn't just treat symptoms, he plans for long-term health. And my long-term health depended on finding better weapons. I cautiously checked the first patient room. Empty, thankfully. Blood on the bed, a smeared handprint on the wall, a hastily discarded gown, signs of a struggle. I closed the door, a temporary psychological barrier. The next room, room 502, was slightly larger, a semi-private room. The door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly. The room was dark, but the emergency light from the hallway provided a faint glow. A window looked out onto the city, now shrouded in the twilight gloom, punctuated by distant flickers of orange and red. Fires. I stepped inside, my axe held ready. The room was empty. 2 beds, both stripped, the mattresses bare. A small bathroom, a closet. This could work. I quickly checked the bathroom, axe raised, empty, no lurking horrors. I closed the door. Then I barricaded the main door with a heavy armchair, a flimsy defense, but better than nothing. I pulled the blinds on the window, cutting off the burning city, cutting off the outside world. I slumped against the wall, axe still in hand, feeling the tremors start to shake my body. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a crushing wave of exhaustion and cold dread. I'm a doctor who survived the first night in a zombie-infested hospital, but the night had barely begun. I took out my phone. No signal, not surprising. The power was still on, but it was flickering sporadically, the hum of the hospital generators sounding strained. How long until they failed completely? My mind raced. What do I need? First, a better weapon. The axe was good for close quarters, but loud and slow. I needed something ranged. A gun. Were there guns in the hospital? Security would have them. The security office was on the ground floor, near the ER. Suicidal to go back there now. No. There might be a side armory in a surgical wing, or even just some kind of blunt object. Second, supplies. Food, water, medication. I had my doctor's bag, left in the ER, likely lost now. But the hospital was a giant pharmacy. Painkillers, antibiotics, trauma kits. Third, a way out, or a way to communicate. A radio? A functioning phone line? I leaned back, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to breathe. My scratched arm throbbed, a small nagging pain. I pulled up my sleeve. 3 shallow red lines, not deep.
Not bleeding profusely, but they were there. A tiny, nagging fear started to bloom in my chest. What if it was more than just a scratch? What if the infection could transmit through a simple graze? No, don't think like that. You're a doctor. You know how infections work. Bites, open wounds, direct fluid contact. But this wasn't like any infection I'd ever seen. Henderson had gone from sick to dead to reanimated in hours. Miller had turned after a bite. The infection is spreading through medical facilities. The warning echoed again. I forced myself to breathe. Deep, slow breaths. I had to stay rational. I had to. I was a doctor. My training demanded it. I needed to secure the room. Check for any other entry points. The closet. It was a standard hospital closet, thin metal door. I opened it cautiously. Inside, spare blankets, a stack of patient charts, a mop and bucket. Nothing useful, nothing threatening. I stood there, the axe feeling impossibly heavy, the silence in the room pressing down on me. The burning city outside, unseen but felt, cast a pall over everything. Memories flashed unbidden. My daughter, Lily, her bright, innocent smile. My wife, Sarah, her warm hand in mine. We'd had dinner just last night, a quiet evening, talking about school, about my latest frustrating shift. Normalcy. Gone. smashed to pieces by an unseen enemy. Are they safe? Are they still alive? The question was a physical ache in my chest. They were at home, miles from the city center, but miles could be nothing in an apocalypse. What would you have done, Elias? Would you have stayed to save others or run to save your family? I still don't know if I made the right choice. I had been on shift. I had been trapped. There had been no choice. I had to get out of the hospital, had to find them. That was my new mission. Survival in this hell and then escape. I needed to plan. The hospital floors. Ground floor, ER, main lobby, security, pharmacy, administration. High traffic, highly dangerous. First floor, imaging, X-ray, MRI, labs. Potentially quiet, but sterile, few supplies. Second floor, general surgery, pre-op, post-op. More specialized equipment, but also patients who might have turned. Third floor, maternity, pediatrics. God, no. The thought of infected children made my stomach churn. Fourth floor, cardiology, stroke unit, specialized equipment. Fifth floor, oncology, my current location. More quiet patients, fewer immediate threats. Sixth floor, ORs, sterile processing. Highly secure, but maybe already compromised. Excellent tools, though. Seventh floor, ICU, CCU. Again, critical patients. Eighth floor, administration, executive offices. Potentially good for communication, but nothing else. I still don't know if I made the right choice. I had been on shift. I had been trapped. There had been no choice. I had to get out of the hospital, had to find them. That was my new mission. Survival in this hell and then escape. I needed to plan. The hospital floors. Ground floor, ER, main lobby, security, pharmacy, administration. High traffic, highly dangerous. First floor, imaging, X-ray, MRI, labs. Potentially quiet, but sterile, few supplies. Second floor, general surgery, pre-op, post-op. More specialized equipment, but also patients who might have turned. Third floor, maternity, pediatrics. God, no. The thought of infected children made my stomach churn. Fourth floor, cardiology, stroke unit, specialized equipment. Fifth floor, oncology, my current location. More quiet patients, fewer immediate threats. Sixth floor, ORs, sterile processing. Highly secure, but maybe already compromised. Excellent tools, though. Seventh floor, ICU, CCU. Again, critical patients. Eighth floor, administration, executive offices. Potentially good for communication, but nothing else. My best bet for weapons and communication was likely the security office on the ground floor, but that was a suicide mission. My best bet for medical supplies was the main pharmacy, also on the ground floor. Think, Elias, think. I needed to go up, not down. The upper floors would be less infested initially. The ORs on the 6th floor might have scalpels, bone saws, maybe even some kind of powerful cauterizing tool. Primitive weapons, but better than nothing. More importantly, the ORs had a direct, filtered air supply. If I could secure one, seal it, it might be a temporary safe haven. And then the roof, the helipad. Could I signal for help? Was there even anyone left to help? The thought of more encounters, more axe swings, more blood made me feel sick to my stomach. I was a healer. I saved lives. I didn't take them. But the world had changed, and I had changed with it. I had to. I stood up, pushing off the wall. The exhaustion was still there, a heavy weight, but a spark of grim determination had ignited. I wasn't just a doctor who survived the first night in a zombie-infested hospital. I was a doctor who would continue to survive, and I would get to my family. I looked at the barricaded door. The sun had set fully, plunging the city into darkness, broken only by the angry red glow of the distant fires. The distant moaning from below had grown fainter, almost imperceptible. But the silence held its own terror. It meant they were moving, or waiting. I gripped the axe. Time to move, to scavenge, to plan. The first night was far from over. I checked my watch.
21:30. Barely an hour since Henderson had reanimated. It felt like a lifetime. I needed to clear the hallway. I couldn't stay barricaded in this room all night. The longer I stayed, the more chances for them to find me, to break through. I had to move, maintain the initiative. A static target is a dead target. I carefully unbarricaded the door, listening for any sound. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the emergency lights. I peered into the hallway. Still empty, save for Reynolds' gruesome corpse. I stepped out, axe held ready, my eyes darting from side to side. The hallway stretched out in both directions, a labyrinth of shadows and potential horrors. To my left, the path back to the stairwell. To my right, more patient rooms, the nurse's station. I decided to head towards the nurse's station first. It might have medical supplies, maybe even a landline phone. A long shot, but worth it. I moved slowly, deliberately, my shoes making soft, rubbery sounds on the linoleum. The emergency lights cast shifting shadows, playing tricks on my eyes. Every distant creak of the building, every groan of settling pipes sent a jolt of fear through me. I passed a patient room. The door was closed.
I hesitated. What if someone was alive in there? What if they were trapped? My medical oath warred with my survival instinct. I couldn't risk it, not yet. I had to secure myself first. Survival of the fittest, Elias. It's ugly, but it's real. The nurse's station came into view, a long counter flanked by computers, medication carts, and the usual clutter of a busy ward. It was dark, the monitors off, the keyboard silent, an eerie calm. As I approached, I noticed something, a splash of dark fluid on the counter, a chair overturned, and on the floor, half hidden behind the counter, a pair of discarded shoes. They looked like Nurse Jessica's. Jessica, who always brought me coffee on my night shifts. A wave of nausea washed over me. No, not Jessica. I moved closer, axe gripped tight. The smell was stronger here. Decay, that sickly sweet smell. I peered over the counter, and there she was, or what was left of her. Jessica's body lay contorted, partially devoured, her face a mask of dried blood and terror. And hunched over her, tearing at her leg, was another one, a hulking, grotesque figure in a patient gown. Mr. Davies, the heart patient from 4B. How did he get up here? He was bigger than Reynolds, broader, and he was growling, a low, constant rumble that vibrated through the floor. He hadn't noticed me yet. His focus was absolute, his hunger insatiable. What would you do? Confront him head on? Try to sneak past? I was a doctor, not a warrior. My heart screamed to run, but my mind knew I needed supplies. And I couldn't leave Davies there. He was a threat. I considered my options. The nurse's station was a confined space. If I engaged him, I could easily be cornered. But there were several entrances, all open. I could move around. I took another deep breath, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart. I had to be quick, silent. One blow. I crept around the counter, my eyes fixed on Davies. He was still tearing at Jessica. The sound was sickening, wet, visceral. I had to fight the urge to vomit. Focus, Elias, focus. I was almost there. 2 feet. I raised the axe, the metal cold and heavy. I brought it down with all my strength, aiming for the back of his head. The blade bit deep. Davies convulsed, a violent, desperate twitch, his growl cut short by a choked, rattling sound. He pitched forward, falling onto Jessica's ruined body. Still, silent. 3 down. God, I'm getting good at this. That's a horrifying thought. I stood there, axe in hand, breathing heavily, the silence pressing down on me again. The air was thick with the smell of death. I swallowed hard, fighting back the bile. I moved to the nurse's station, my eyes scanning the area for useful items. A medication cart stood nearby, its drawers locked. My keys, The ones that opened all the supply cabinets and medicine lockers were in my discarded doctor's bag in the ER. Damn it! I tried the drawers, pulling, twisting, but they held fast. Hospital-grade locks. I needed to pick them or find another way. I'm a doctor, not a locksmith. I looked at the computers. All off. No power. The phone bank. I picked up a receiver. Dead. No dial tone. The entire communication system was down. My hopes deflated. No quick way to contact the outside. No easy access to medication. This wasn't going to be easy. I continued to search, my gaze sweeping the counter, the shelves. Discarded paper, pens, a half-eaten sandwich now crawling with flies. Nothing. Then my eyes landed on a small red box on a shelf, tucked away behind a stack of charts. It was a trauma kit, basic but vital. Gauze, bandages, medical tape, antiseptic wipes, a tourniquet. Exactly what I needed. I grabbed it, clutching it tightly. This was a start. I quickly opened it, pulled out a small bottle of antiseptic solution, and poured it over the scratches on my arm. The sting was sharp but welcome. It felt like I was doing something medically, even in this wasteland. I wrapped a piece of gauze around the scratches, securing it with tape. A small, familiar comfort in a world gone mad. My gaze fell on a small steel tray. On it, a pair of heavy, blunt surgical scissors. Not ideal, but better than nothing for a secondary weapon or for prying something open. I took them, weighing them in my hand. Then a reflex hammer. Heavy, good for a blunt force impact. I took that too. Every item could be a weapon, every tool a means of survival. As I gathered the supplies, a new sound reached me, faint but distinct. A whimpering, coming from one of the patient rooms down the hall. My blood ran cold. Someone alive? Or one of them mimicking human sounds? The latter was a common trope in horror, but I knew medically it was unlikely. The infected seemed to communicate only through growls and moans. The whimpering continued, sounding genuinely distressed. It was a child's cry. A child. My medical oath, buried under layers of adrenaline and terror, resurfaced with a vengeance. I couldn't leave a child. Not if there was any chance it was alive, uninfected. What kind of doctor would I be if I did? I hesitated, the axe in one hand, surgical scissors in the other. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear and duty. This could be a trap, a distraction, or it could be a desperate plea for help. I looked down the dark hallway, towards the source of the sound. The whimpering was coming from room 507. What would you do? Go to the child, or prioritize your own survival?
This is the kind of impossible choice that defines you. I gripped the axe tighter, my jaw clenched. I couldn't leave a child. I wouldn't, not without checking. I started moving, cautiously, towards room 507. Each step felt heavy, loaded with a terrifying uncertainty. The whimpering grew louder, more distinct. It was definitely a child, a little girl by the sound of it. I reached the door to room 507. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible. The whimpering was now a soft, continuous sob. I pushed the door open slowly, silently, axe held high. The room was almost completely dark, only a faint emergency light from the hallway filtering in. But I could make out a small figure huddled in the corner of the room, on one of the patient beds. A small, blonde-haired girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was wrapped in a blanket, trembling, her face buried in her knees. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice rough. "It's okay. I'm a doctor. Are you alone?" The girl looked up, her eyes wide with terror, blue orbs reflecting the faint light. She stared at me, then at the axe in my hand, and let out a small, terrified squeak. "Don't hurt me!" "It's okay," I repeated, lowering the axe slowly, trying to look as non-threatening as possible, which was difficult when covered in blood and holding a weapon. "I'm not going to hurt you. What's your name?" Lily,"
She stammered, her voice barely audible. My name's Lily." My breath caught in my throat. Lily, the same name as my daughter? A cruel twist of fate, or a sign. "Lily, what are you doing here? Where are your parents?" She started crying again, deep, shuddering sobs. "Mommy, Mommy, she changed. She bit Daddy. They're outside." She pointed vaguely towards the hallway. My blood ran cold. Changed? Bitten? This child had witnessed unspeakable horror. Her own parents turned into monsters. "It's okay, Lily. It's okay now. You're safe with me." The words felt inadequate, hollow, but I had to offer some comfort. "We need to get out of here. Can you walk?" She nodded, slowly, still trembling. "Good. Can you be very quiet for me? We need to be very quiet. There are bad people outside." I couldn't bring myself to say the word zombies to a child. She nodded again, clutching her blanket tighter. I scooped her up, holding her close. She was light, fragile. Her small, trembling body was a stark contrast to the heavy axe in my other hand. The weight of responsibility settled on me, a new, heavy burden. I'm a doctor, and now I'm also a protector. "We're going to be okay, Lily," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "We're going to get through this night." I moved back to the nurse's station, Lily clutched tightly to my chest. I scanned the area again, looking for anything else.
A small bag, perhaps? A backpack? Nothing. I grabbed a clean sheet from the linen cart, quickly tearing it into strips. I wrapped some of it around the axe handle for a better grip, and fashioned a makeshift sling for Lily to keep her close, secure, and to keep my hands free. Improvise, adapt, overcome. That's what they teach in emergency medicine. My mind was clearer now. My objective had shifted. It wasn't just about my survival anymore. It was about hers. I'm a doctor who survived the first night in a zombie-infested hospital, and now I have a ward of 1. We needed to go up, the 6th floor, the ORs. It was the best chance for a defensible position, for a temporary haven. I looked down the hallway, then back at the body of Davies, then Jessica. The smell, the horror. I had to get Lily away from this. I started moving again, carefully, silently, towards the stairwell. Lily's small, warm body pressed against me, a fragile beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. She was surprisingly quiet, clutching my scrubs, her face buried against my shoulder. Every now and then, a soft, shuddering breath. We reached the stairwell door. I pushed it open slowly, peering into the concrete shaft. Dark, still. Just the hum of the emergency lights. I started climbing, one careful step at a time. Lily's weight a constant reminder of my new responsibility. The first night. It's not just about surviving, it's about deciding who you're going to be in this new world. The 6th floor door. I pushed it open cautiously. This was the operating theaters. The air was colder here, sterile. The hallway was narrower, lit by more emergency lights, casting long, stark shadows. To my right, a series of locked ORs. To my left, the sterile processing room, then a long corridor leading to the recovery area. I moved towards the ORs, my eyes scanning the doors. They were heavy, metal, designed to be airtight, perfect for a temporary stronghold. Most had small, reinforced windows. I chose OR 3. It was one of the largest, usually used for complex surgeries. It had a heavy steel door, a small viewing window. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. Most ORs were kept locked for security. I looked at the lock. A standard keycard reader, but also a manual override. A small, recessed button that required a specific tool. A screwdriver? A thin piece of metal? My surgical scissors. I tried the point, forcing it into the tiny gap, twisting. It didn't work. The metal was too soft. I cursed under my breath. Time was running out. I could hear sounds from the floor below, a distant thudding. They were coming up. Lily whimpered, sensing my anxiety. "What's wrong, doctor?" "Nothing, sweetie, just a stubborn door." I tried to sound calm, reassuring, but my heart was pounding. I tried the blunt end of the surgical scissors. Nothing. I looked at the axe. Too destructive. It would make too much noise, shatter the door. Think, Elias, think. I was a doctor. I solved problems. My gaze fell on the heavy crash cart outside OR2. It had a flat top with various medical equipment and a heavy defibrillator unit, and on its side, a small toolkit, standard issue for maintenance staff. It had a screwdriver, but it was 2 ORs away, exposed. I glanced back at the stairwell. The thudding was louder now, getting closer. Footsteps, slow, dragging. "Lily, I need you to be brave for a minute," I whispered. "I'm gonna put you down. You stay right here, absolutely still. Don't make a sound, okay?" She nodded, her eyes wide with fear, but a flicker of resolve in them. I gently set her down, pressing her against the wall next to the OR door. "Don't move, no matter what you hear. I'll be right back." I gripped the axe, took a deep breath, and burst out of the alcove, sprinting towards the crash cart. My heart hammered against my ribs. Exposed, vulnerable. I reached the crash cart, fumbling with the toolkit latch. It was old, rusty. It took 3 desperate tugs before it sprang open. I snatched a flathead screwdriver, the metal cool in my hand. As I turned, I saw it. A figure at the end of the hallway, near the recovery area. A nurse, or what used to be a nurse. Susan, from Post-Op. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, her jaw hanging slack, and her uniform was smeared with blood. She turned, those dead eyes locking onto me. She let out a guttural shriek, the sound echoing through the sterile hallway, and began to lurch towards me. "Damn it," I roared, already sprinting back towards Lily, screwdriver clutched in my hand, the axe feeling useless at this range. I reached Lily, scooped her up, and pressed myself against the OR door. Susan was coming, fast, that agonizing, broken shuffle, but relentless. I jammed the screwdriver into the manual override slot, twisting with all my might. The metal groaned. I pushed, pulled. It wouldn't budge. Susan was 20 feet away, 15. Her growls were deafening. "Come on, you bastard!" I twisted harder, putting my full weight into it. The screwdriver bent, the plastic handle digging into my palm. But then, a soft click. The lock mechanism whirred, and the heavy door to OR3 swung inward. I pulled it open, shoved Lily inside, and stumbled in after her, slamming the door shut. Just as Susan's mangled hand slammed against the other side, a dull thump that vibrated through the metal. I fumbled with the internal lock, twisting the heavy bolt until it clicked into place. The door was secure, for now. I leaned against the cold metal, chest heaving, gulping air, Lily trembling in my arms. The sound of Susan's frustrated growls and bangs echoed from the other side of the door. We were safe. Temporarily. I'm a doctor who survived the first night in a zombie-infested hospital with a small, terrified child in tow. The OR was dark, lit only by the green emergency lights. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Surgical equipment sat shrouded under sterile drapes, looming like ghosts in the dim light. A large stainless steel table dominated the center of the room. A bank of monitors hung dormant. I set Lily down gently. She immediately curled into a ball, clutching her blanket, her small body shaking uncontrollably. "It's okay, Lily. We're safe here for a bit." I tried to sound confident, but my voice was still ragged. I walked to the small viewing window in the door, cautiously peering out. Susan was still there, pressing herself against the door, growling, her pale face a horrifying mask against the glass. Her hands scraped at the metal, leaving faint dark smears. Then she wasn't alone. Another figure joined her. A patient in a wheelchair, now dragging himself forward, his legs useless, his upper body propelling him with horrifying speed. Mr. Johnson from the stroke ward. More of them, always more. They pressed against the door, a growing horde. The growling intensified, a chorus of hungry death. I turned away from the window, leaning against the cold, sterile wall. My body was aching, my mind exhausted. But I couldn't rest. Not yet. I needed to secure the OR, fully. What about the air vents? Were they sealed? The emergency oxygen tanks, could they be used for something?
I scanned the room, my doctor's brain, ever logical, ever searching for solutions, kicking into overdrive. The OR was a treasure trove of potential. Scalpels, bone saws, cauterizers, high-pressure air hoses. All could be weapons. All could buy us more time. Lily was still curled up, whimpering softly. My daughter's face flashed in my mind again. Lily. I had to protect this child. It was my only purpose now. The night was long. The growling outside the door was a constant, horrifying reminder. But in this sterile, dark OR, for a brief moment, we had found a sliver of hope. The clock on the dormant OR monitor glowed faintly. 22:45. The first night in hell was just getting started. And I, Dr. Elias Thorne, had to figure out how to survive it, for both of us. The survival of this small, fragile life depended on me, and I wouldn't fail. What would a real survivor do? Not just a doctor, a survivor. I moved to a large metal cabinet, testing the lock. Locked. Everything was locked. This hospital, designed to protect life, was now trapping us, denying us the tools we needed to fight for it. I looked at the axe, then at the heavy steel door.
There has to be a way. The guttural growls outside the heavy OR door echoed through the sterile room, a constant, abrasive reminder of the horrors lurking just beyond the steel barrier. Each thud against the metal sent a shiver down my spine, a jarring counterpoint to the soft, rhythmic breaths of Lily, who had finally drifted into a fitful sleep, huddled under a surgical drape on the floor in the corner of the OR. Her small, trembling form was a stark contrast to the overwhelming machinery of death now surrounding us. I stood by the door, screwdriver in hand, listening. Susan and Mr. Johnson were still out there, joined by what sounded like a growing number of others. Their frustrated moans and scrapes against the door were relentless. How long could this door hold? OR doors were designed to be robust, pressure-sealed, but not against a relentless, mindless horde. My mind raced, categorizing threats and resources. Threats. 1. The infected. An unknown number of them, outside the door, potentially roaming the entire hospital. Their strength seemed inhuman, their hunger insatiable. 2. Time. The longer we stayed, the more likely more infected would converge. Night was falling, increasing their advantage in the darkness. 3. Supplies. Extremely limited. No food, no water, minimal medical supplies, my small trauma kit, and primitive weapons. 4. The hospital itself. A labyrinth, now a death trap. Power fluctuations, potential for structural collapse, unknown hazards. 5. Lily, a child, physically vulnerable, emotionally traumatized. My responsibility. Resources. 1. My medical knowledge. Understanding anatomy, physiology, even basic engineering for improvising tools barricades. My knowledge of the hospital layout. 2. The OR. A sterile, largely enclosed space, potentially defensible if I could find better barricades and weapons. Contains many specialized tools. 3. My axe and screwdriver, basic melee weapons, for now. 4. Lily's resilience, her quiet determination. My gaze swept the dark OR. The emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows, turning familiar equipment into monstrous shapes. The large, stainless steel operating table in the center gleamed faintly. Around it, various specialized instrument carts, also stainless steel, stood like silent sentinels. A row of heavy storage cabinets lined one wall, likely filled with sterile instruments, sutures, bandages, but they were locked. Everything important was locked. Hospital security protocols designed for sterile environments, now a death sentence. I tried a cabinet door, solid steel, thick gauge. The latch was a heavy, robust mechanism. I jammed the screwdriver into the lock, twisting with all my might. The metal shrieked in protest, but the lock held firm. This wasn't a cheap padlock, it was engineered. My eyes fell on a smaller, rolling cart,
typically used for anesthesia supplies. It was open. Inside, a variety of drugs, syringes, intubation equipment, and a small, heavy wrench. Jackpot. I grabbed the wrench, its weight a comforting heft in my hand. Better than the flimsy screwdriver. I returned to the storage cabinet and, using the wrench, I hammered at the lock, aiming for the weak points around the bolt. The metallic clang echoed deafeningly in the enclosed space, followed by a momentary lull in the growling outside, as if the infected had paused, confused by the new sound. I hammered again, harder, more desperately. The lock mechanism groaned. With a final furious blow, the metal housing around the lock shattered, springs and pins flying. The cabinet door swung open with a victorious creak. A flood of relief washed over me. Finally! Inside, neatly organized on shelves, were what I desperately needed. Scalpels, dozens of them, razor-sharp, individually wrapped. Not a primary weapon, but excellent for precision or as throwing knives in a pinch. I grabbed a handful, tucking them into my scrub pockets. Bone saws, a small manual one, designed for precision, not power, but still a serrated edge. Surgical steel trays, various sizes, heavy, blunt. Could be used as shields or thrown. Sutures, bandages, antiseptics. More advanced versions of what was in my trauma kit. Essential. Drugs, an entire pharmacy in miniature. Powerful sedatives, broad-spectrum antibiotics, painkillers. These could be invaluable, not just for us, but for what they represented. Could I incapacitate them? No, their neurological functions were too basic. But what if I needed to put down an infected humanely, or ease someone's suffering? I quickly loaded my pockets with scalpels, painkillers, and a handful of antibiotic vials. I grabbed a roll of heavy surgical tape, always useful. Then my gaze fell on something else. A small, sterile pack, neatly labeled. Surgical staples. Used for rapidly closing large wounds. Small, metal, pointed. Could be effective small projectiles or even used to secure barricades. I took a few packs. The OR table in the center of the room. Its base was heavy, cast iron. With the surgical steel trays, I could create a makeshift shield. I grabbed the largest tray, testing its weight. It was cumbersome, but durable. I moved to the OR door again, Lily still sleeping soundly, a tiny island of peace in this storm. I could hear the infected outside, still banging, still growling. But now it sounded like they were testing the edges of the door, not just the center. They're learning.
Or more of them are showing up, trying different points of entry. I needed a better barricade. The OR table was too heavy to move easily, but the smaller instrument carts? Yes. I quickly wheeled 2 heavy instrument carts to the door, placing them directly against it. They were on wheels, but the weight offered some resistance. I used the surgical tape to try and secure them, wrapping it around the carts and the door handles, binding them together. Flimsy, but it was something. As I worked, the sound of the banging outside intensified. Thump, thump, crack. A new sound. The door frame was groaning. I could hear splintering. They're breaking through. My heart leaped into my throat. Panic flared, cold and sharp. I spun around, looking for Lily. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open, blinking in the dim light. "Doctor?" Her voice was small, confused. "Lily, stay down, stay quiet," I hissed, grabbing the axe and the heavy surgical tray. The doorframe splintered again, louder this time. A hairline crack appeared in the steel door itself, radiating from the lock mechanism. No, not yet! My eyes darted around the OR. The back wall had a large, heavy panel, an access hatch for maintenance to the ventilation system. It was bolted shut, but if I could get it open, escape. I had to buy time. I ran to a nearby gas canister, a large green tank of medical oxygen. Heavy.
I dragged it across the floor, the metal scraping with a terrible screech that made the infected outside go into a frenzy of growling and banging. I heaved it against the door, adding another layer to the barricade. My muscles screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. Another crack from the door. A small piece of the frame broke off, falling to the floor inside the OR with a sharp clink. A sliver of pale, dead light appeared through the gap. And a finger. A gray, gnarled finger, pushing its way through, blindly searching. "No!" I screamed, bringing the axe down on the barricade, not the door, hitting the gas canister with a reverberating clang. The impact sent the finger outside, but the door shuddered violently. I had to use the OR's resources. The operating table. It was fixed to the floor, but its articulating arm, the one holding the overhead light, was movable. And heavy. I jumped onto the table, grabbing the large articulated light arm. It was thick metal, designed to hold multiple heavy lights. I wrestled with it, trying to swing it around, to use it as a ram against the door from the inside. Just then, a portion of the door frame gave way entirely. A larger gap appeared. Another hand, then an arm, forced its way through. It thrashed wildly, fingers grasping, searching. I let out a primal yell, swinging the heavy light arm with all my might.
It connected with the arm pushing through the door, a sickening crack of bone. The arm disappeared, followed by a fresh chorus of agonized growls. I repeated the motion, slamming the light arm against the inside of the door frame where the breach was. Each impact sent a jolt of my arms, but it seemed to be holding them back, making them hesitate. What would a doctor do when conventional methods fail? Improvise. My eyes fell on a canister of compressed nitrous oxide, laughing gas. It was for anesthesia, highly flammable. An idea, insane but desperate, sparked in my mind. If they broke through, I could douse them. And then, I needed a spark. I quickly rummaged through the instruments cabinet, looking for something, anything that could create a spark. A cauterizing pen? Yes. It produced a controlled electrical arc. Perfect. I grabbed one, a long pen-like device with a thin metal tip. I also grabbed a small bottle of isopropyl alcohol, another highly flammable liquid. I moved back to the door. Lily now huddled closer to me, her small hand clutching my scrub leg, her eyes wide with uncomprehending terror. The banging continued. They were regrouping. They were smart enough to recognize a weak point. I had maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. I looked at Lily. Her face was pale, tear-streaked. "Lily, listen to me. This is very important. If they get in, I need you to run. See that panel on the back wall?" I pointed. "It leads to the air ducts. Small space. You can crawl in there. I will create a distraction. You run. Promise me." Her lower lip trembled. "No, I want to stay with you, Doctor." "Lily, this is how we both survive. You have to be brave. You have to keep going. Can you do that for me?" My voice was rough, choked with emotion. I couldn't promise her safety, but I could give her a chance. She looked at me, then at the door, then back at me. A deep, shuddering breath. "Okay." My heart ached. This innocent child, forced into this nightmare. I looked at the access panel. It was secured by a series of heavy bolts. No way I could remove them by hand or with the wrench in time. But perhaps it wasn't the way out, but a temporary hiding place. A place for Lily. I needed to clear the immediate area around the door. The instrument carts were now a mess, tape torn. The oxygen canister had rolled slightly. I grabbed the nitrous oxide tank, dragging it to the immediate vicinity of the weakening door. I knew the OR had an emergency fire suppression system, but I couldn't activate it without a specific key card, or potentially flooding the entire room. I also found a sturdy, thick length of flexible tubing, part of the anesthesia machine. It was perfect. I attached it to the nitrous oxide tank, turning the valve slightly. A faint hiss of gas. My plan was forming, desperate and terrifying. When they breach, I douse them, then ignite. It'll be quick, violent, but effective. The main power grid flickered, then died. The emergency lights, already dim, became our only source of illumination, casting a sickly green pallor over everything. The OR, a place of precise science, was now a primitive battleground. A massive crash. The OR door bowed inwards. The central lock mechanism, already compromised, finally gave way. The metal groaned and ripped. "Lily, go, now!" I screamed, shoving her towards the ventilation panel. "Crawl in, hide, don't come out until you hear my voice." She didn't hesitate this time. Her small, brave body scrambled towards the panel, disappearing into the shadows of the back wall. The door burst open with a resounding bang. 2 infected stumbled into the OR, Susan and Mr. Johnson. Their eyes, milky and dead, immediately locked on to me. They moved with a lurching, frantic speed. "Come and get it, you bastards!" I roared, a desperate, animalistic sound, as I turned the valve on the nitrous oxide tank full blast. A powerful hiss, a freezing cloud of gas erupted from the hose, engulfing the 2 incoming infected. They staggered, confused, their growls muffled by the gas. They clawed at the air, their movements slowing, their eyes flickering. I grabbed the cauterizing pen, thumbed the switch. The tip glowed a bright, angry orange. With a deep, guttural cry, I stepped forward, aiming the cauterizing pen at the cloud of gas. Boom! The OR erupted in a flash of blinding light and a concussive blast that threw me backward. The nitrous oxide, highly flammable, had ignited. A roar of fire filled the room, consuming Susan and Mr. Johnson in an instant. Their screams, if they made any, were lost in the inferno. I landed hard against a metal cabinet, the wind knocked out of me. My head slammed against the steel, stars exploding in my vision. The pain was excruciating. My ears were ringing, my skin scorched, my hair singed. The smell of burning flesh, of singed plastic, filled the air, acrid and nauseating. I pushed myself up, dizzy, disoriented, my body screaming in protest. The immediate area around the door was a smoking, burning hellscape. The 2 infected were gone, reduced to charred, smoldering husks. The OR door itself was warped, twisted, a gaping hole now where the frame had been. Flames licked at the ceiling, threatening to spread. Smoke filled the room, thick and black, stinging my eyes, burning my lungs. I coughed, a deep, racking cough that brought tears to my eyes. I just blew up an OR, a terrifying, unprecedented act for a doctor. I stumbled towards the wall where Lily had hidden. "Lily, are you okay?" "Lily!" My voice was hoarse, raw from the smoke and the scream. No answer. Panic surged, cold and absolute, overriding the pain in my body. Oh God, no. Did the blast get her? Did I kill her? I reached the vent panel, desperately searching the shadows. "Lily, answer me!" A small, muffled cough. "Doctor, it's hot." Relief, so powerful it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. "Stay there, Lily. Don't move. I'm going to get you out." I looked at the burning OR. The fire was spreading, consuming the plastic shrouds, the sterile drapes, the exposed wiring. The smoke was becoming unbearable. I had seconds. I needed to find an exit and fast. The OR door was gone, but the hallway was now an inferno, and the noise from the explosion would have drawn every infected thing in the vicinity. My eyes darted to another, smaller door, marked Scrub Room. It connected to an adjacent OR and then to another service corridor. It was our only hope. I stumbled towards it, axe in hand, my vision blurred by smoke and tears. The heat was intense, blistering my skin. I grabbed the handle. It was hot, searing my palm, but I twisted it. Locked, of course. No time for the wrench, no time for finesse. I raised the axe and brought it down on the door handle, then again and again with frantic, desperate blows. The metal shrieked, groaned, then shattered. The door flew open. Smoke billowed into the scrub room.
It was dark, a small tiled space with sinks and antiseptic dispensers. Through it, I could see another door leading to the corridor. "Lily, come on, we need to go!" I screamed, still coughing, my lungs burning. Her small, soot-stained face emerged from the ventilation panel. She scrambled out, clutching her blanket, her eyes wide with terror. She looked at the burning OR, then at me, then at the open scrub room door. "Run, Lily, run to that door! Get out of here!" I pushed her gently forward. She didn't hesitate. Her small legs pumped, a blur in the smoke-filled room, heading for the scrub room. I followed, coughing, choking, the heat and smoke overwhelming. I looked back at the OR. The flames were licking the ceiling, consuming everything. This entire floor was going to burn. I burst into the scrub room, grabbing Lily's hand, pulling her through the next door. It led to a quiet, dark service corridor. Blessed, fresh air, albeit still smelling faintly of smoke, filled my lungs. We were out, but now we were exposed. I looked back. The OR, once a symbol of life and healing, was a raging inferno, pouring smoke into the hallway, setting off sprinklers that hissed and steamed. The explosion had done its job. It had cleared the immediate threat, but it had also painted a giant target on our backs.
I'm a doctor who survived the first night in a zombie-infested hospital, and now I'm also an arsonist. The irony was not lost on me, even in my terror. I pulled Lily along, moving as fast as I could, away from the smoke, away from the inevitable horde that would be drawn by the fire, the noise, the chaos. We needed to get to the roof. It was our only escape. The stairwell was to our left, up, always up. We ran, our footsteps echoing in the silent corridor, the distant wail of fire alarms now joining the symphony of horror. The hospital was waking up, but not to save us, to consume us. The 7th floor, ICU, more patients, more potential infected. The 8th floor, administration, likely empty. The roof, helipad, hope. We reached the stairwell door. I pushed it open, heart hammering, and started climbing, pulling Lily along, her small hand warm in mine. My lungs burned, my head throbbed, every muscle screamed in protest. Just keep going, Elias, just keep going. We reached the 8th floor. The corridor was dark, silent, lined with office doors. No growls, no banging, just the distant roar of the fire below and the incessant fire alarms. I needed a moment, just a moment, to breathe, to think. My legs felt like lead. I pulled Lily into a small, unbarricaded office, a temporary respite. The room was dark, cold, filled with filing cabinets and a large executive desk. No windows. Good. I collapsed against a filing cabinet, pulling Lily close. She was crying softly now, her small body shaking uncontrollably. "It's okay, Lily. We're safe for a moment. We're almost there." I stroked her soot-stained hair, my hand trembling. My watch read 23:30. Midnight was approaching. The first night, and it had been a baptism by fire, literally. I knew the roof access was usually a reinforced door, likely locked, leading to another stairwell or ladder. But the helipad offered a chance, a desperate, impossible chance. I looked at the axe, then at the cauterizing pen. I had fought, I had killed, I had destroyed, and I had protected. This isn't the doctor I trained to be, but it's the doctor the world needs now. The roar of the fire below intensified. The building groaned, the floor trembling slightly. The hospital was becoming a furnace. We couldn't stay. I took a deep breath. "Okay, Lily, one more push. We're going to the roof. We're going to find a way out of this zombie-infested hospital." I looked at her, searching for strength in her small, brave eyes. Her gaze met mine. A flicker of resolve, a desperate hope. "Okay, doctor." I stood up, pushing away the exhaustion, the pain. The adrenaline had returned, a cold clinical surge. I was a doctor. My purpose was to save lives, and tonight I was going to save one more.
I gripped the axe, checked my pockets for scalpels, prepared for whatever came next. The first night was almost over, but the war for survival had just begun. And I, Dr. Elias Thorne, was ready for it. What else could I be?